More than 6,000 people have already voted early in Knox County. That includes more than 4,500 in the Republican primary, 2,000 in the Democratic primary, and 30 general election only ballots. Now, historically, Tennessee has experienced low voter turnout. A new Pew Research study found in 2014, voter turnout in Tennessee was 28%, the lowest in the entire United States. But experts say factors like the new online registration process and high-profile races, including the one for governor, could be motivation to turn that around. In the last election, early votes made up about half of the total number of votes. Experts say the next step is taking a closer look at Tennessee's counties to see what obstacles prevent voters from actually going to the polls. And as early voting continues, we are introducing you to the leading candidates for governor all week long. WBIR 10 News reporter Katie Inman explains how candidate Bill Lee feels about some of the hot issues in this race.
Bill Lee is a Republican farmer and businessman from Middle Tennessee.
And I'm running for governor.
He says his non-political roots are what differentiates him from his competitors in the Tennessee governor race.
A true outsider. I've never run for office before and never worked for the government. And to me, that's a real strength. It allows me to see things from the perspective of the people that we serve and to bring in fresh ideas and new approaches.
Lee believes the gas tax hike could have been done differently.
If you don't manage the budget in government, you raise taxes. And that's something that I don't want to do. And so I will be committed to managing a budget in a way that does allocate resources to things like transportation and infrastructure, things that we need.
And as far as bringing big employers to the state of Tennessee, Lee believes in a homegrown approach.
I think a job created in Tennessee is more valuable than one brought here. And so I would invest as much in starting up, in supporting, in incubating new businesses as I would in trying to attract businesses to Tennessee. I think that's the smartest approach.
And you can find early voting locations online at WBIR.com, as well as a section featuring the answers from every candidate running for governor. The last day for early voting is July 28th. Election day is on August the 2nd.
All right.